So we are meeting after a very long time, maybe 2 months. The last time we met was on, I think, 1st April. But today we'll be discussing a very interesting topic, a scientific approach to religion. So how can a scientific approach to religion be like? We all know science doesn't believe in any kind of dogma or any preconceived notion. It believes in experimental verification based on experiments conducted and also all the hypothesis that is put forward normally is subject to experimental verification. And when experimental verification takes place, it has to be repeated several times. So that is in brief what a scientific approach to material sciences would be like, or even any other secular science. But the question was, can religion be subjected to this same scientific approach? Because during the Renaissance period, many of the scientists believed that we don't need the concept of God, or we do not need religion to lead a good life. Scientific principles were sufficient to explain the cosmic order. They were sufficient to explain physical phenomena that we see around us, the physical forces that guide us, the environment around us, and everything can be scientifically explained. So we don't need a creator God or any form of God to rule over us. We do not need to even have somebody who controls this whole universe from wherever he exists, because that cannot be experimentally verified. So that's how science and the scientific spirit became popular several hundred years ago. And that started threatening the so-called organized religion. Because religion, though it was based on sound scientific principles by religious scientists or the so-called prophets who have visited this earth, who have spread their ideas by experimental verification of universal spiritual principles in their own life. And that is how scriptures were created, books were created, and their words became, they were the evidence for spiritual truth, just as spiritual principles were enunciated by experimental verification by scientists. So we can call these people the founders of different religions, the founders of different religious movements, who really experimented with these spiritual truths, just as a scientist would do in the laboratory, and verified certain spiritual principles, just as the law of gravitation. It existed even before Newton discovered them. Not that gravity, the law of gravitation was something new. It's a common phenomena we see around us. But it was Newton. The credibility of a law which explains gravitational forces was first enunciated by Newton. So we give credit to him. And the law existed even before Newton discovered it. Many apples had been falling before Newton really thought over it. And then he decided to question it. That is how the law of gravitation became generalized. It was not a particular incident which happened where an apple was seen falling. Many people had seen this apple falling. But it was, we should give credit to Newton for generalizing that and explaining it through the law of gravitation, through the different mathematical laws that explain gravitation. So also with spirituality. All these prophets who come from time to time depending on the cultural background in which they were born, the historical, the geographical location, the culture of the people, the race where they were born, depending on that, they enunciated certain spiritual principles which form the core principles of that particular scripture, which are the words uttered by those prophets. So it has happened all over the world. There are so many great people, great spiritual scientists. I would not call them religious people. They are actually spiritual scientists because it is the same spirit which enabled or which motivated a scientist to discover these different scientific laws, motivated those people to discover certain scientific laws which they discovered through strenuous effort, through experimental verification. Mind you, it's not that they just intellectually explained certain laws or certain spiritual laws. They experienced those truths in their own lives and they became, that was the proof, their experimental verification, their experiences that they had were the proofs that they provided. Just as a scientist would provide proofs, experimental verification in the laboratory, they performed these experiments in the laboratory of their own life. So when we approach religion in this spirit, then we can say it is a scientific approach to religion. So there's nothing dogmatic about it. We take a human being, because religion became important only for human beings. You don't expect animals or any other plant kingdom or any other species to even discuss religion. Religion became a matter of concern or a matter of importance only to human beings, because he found that human beings need something to discipline them, something to maintain the cosmic order. If you see most of nature, which in Hindu philosophy is known as Prakriti, we don't require, it runs in a cosmic order. The whole cosmos, in fact, all the planets, the stars, everything maintains a cosmic order in the universe. There is a cosmic order in the universe which is not broken. It's only when human beings, out of selfishness, out of the desire to possess more, out of that evil tendency, they try to grab certain powers for themselves and manipulate nature to such an extent they started abusing nature, and in the process they broke the cosmic order. In Hindu philosophy, it is known as adharma. Dharma means religion. Literally, religion in Hindu philosophy or in Vedanta means one thing: that which upholds, that which maintains the cosmic order, that which maintains harmony, that which maintains peace in the world. So wherever this dharma is broken, the laws of, just as when we break the laws of science and tamper with the scientific energy, scientific forces, we have nuclear bombs, we have misuse of science. It's not that science always is used for the betterment of people. There are sciences which promote harmony, promote peace, promote peace, and also that has led to many life-saving discoveries which promote harmony. But at the same time, the evil in the minds of men have also forced human beings to use science to destroy humankind, to break that order, to destroy that order. That approach is known as adharma. Dharma means religion in Hinduism. Adharma means non-religion, or you may say anything that opposes the cosmic order is known as adharma. So this is the first approach Vedanta had, or the scientists of spirituality, as we can call them, the rishis. They are really spiritual scientists. So they were the ones who first enunciated or propounded these spiritual laws. Just as the law of gravitation, the law of electricity, the law of forces, the law behind all the atomic structure and all the things that science has discovered till now, the law that governs the body forces, the law that governs blood circulation, heartbeat, and all the laws that medicine and all different sciences have formulated by keen observation and developed these different sciences. So also the spiritual prophets, they may belong to any country or any race or any part of the world. The truths that they propounded were based on certain experiences they had. Now, why then the question may arise, if religion is created by these spiritual scientists, whom we can call prophets or saints, or then why there is so much of quarrel in the name of religion? Scientists also do quarrel. The people who use science for the betterment of humanity, and there are another group of scientists who are determined to create havoc, destruction by using the same scientific principles. So you can't blame science for that. Similarly, we can't blame religion for some of the quarrels, not some. Very often religions, the people who have not understood the essential core principles of spirituality, which are there in every religion, they have fought over the externals. They have fought over rituals, they have fought over faiths, they have fought over books, they have fought over the different conceptions of God they have. He said, my God is better than your God. That's how these dogmas, and when people could not understand religion, could not be scientific in their approach to religion, when large groups of people refused to treat religion with the same scientific spirit as they treated materialism, they started quarreling amongst each other. So that's why we find so many religious wars, so many crusades, fighting over externals. Truly spiritual people will not quarrel with each other, because that's against the spirit, universal spirit of true religion. So that portion, which is known as the core principle of every religion, as I said, in Hinduism, has been defined in two words: dharma, that which upholds harmony, that which upholds the cosmic order, and adharma, that which destroys, has a tendency to destroy this cosmic order by wanton destruction, by destroying people, killing people, abusing environment, and all these efforts which misuse dharma is known as adharma. So also with all religions, there are people who are dharmic, who follow dharma, who maintain the cosmic order, and there are people who break the cosmic order. They follow adharma. So the role of these spiritual scientists or prophets is to re-establish dharma or true religion by again and again emphasizing the core scientific principles, core religious principles in a very scientific way. So if you go to the original founders of this religion, the problem comes only when we quarrel with each other over the interpretation of religion. If you go back to the basic teachings of these prophets, whether it is Buddha, Christ, Krishna, or any other prophet, if you go back to their original teachings, there's very little scope for quarrel, or there's very little, it's only over the unessentials or the external aspects of religion that the quarrel takes place. So basically, if one is truly scientific, that's the topic of today's discussion, can we be scientific and at the same time be spiritual? In fact, you can't be spiritual if you are not scientific. It's better to put it that way. Because spirituality is something which does not ask you to merely believe. Because somebody says, I believe in this, you have to believe in it. No scientist will say that. No scientist will say, because I say gravitation is a law, or it has been proved by me, you also should believe it. You have the freedom to test the principles of gravitation in the laboratory. Then only you have, you will be convinced to accept that hypothesis as a law, as a theory, which has been proven. But until such time that religious people allow that same freedom to its adherents, to its followers. So don't believe just because I say. Go back to the scriptures, verify it in your own life. If you believe in Christ, try to find out what did Christ say about human nature. What did he tell us to do in the Bible? In the words, his words, the gospel according to John, according to the different disciples of Christ, they recorded their version of what the truths, whatever truths they heard from the prophet's mouth. So also with every religion. Buddha did not ask his disciples. In fact, his last advice to his disciple Ananda was Atma Dipo Bhava, be a light unto yourself. That just because he vouched for only one thing, he said, I have followed this path and I have discovered the truth or nirvana or whatever truth of spirituality that he propounded. And he said, don't believe just because I said that will, you have to accept it. You become a light unto yourself. When Ananda, his disciple, was very sad when Buddha was about to depart from this world, he said, when you go, what will happen to us? He said, why? You become a light unto yourselves. I have given you the principles, test it. So also scientific theories, when you talk of scientific approach to material science, any science, physics, chemistry, mathematics, every science, it does not depend on the persons who discovered it. Whether Newton discovered it or somebody else, Einstein discovered some certain things, they are universal truths. They are applicable not only in the laboratory where these discoveries were made, they are universally verified, experimentally verified truths which can be verified anywhere in the world because they are universal. That is why science became very powerful and the scientific spirit gained an upper hand, and they criticized everything that was religious. They said religion is not based on scientific principles, so we have to discard it. That's the reason why people lost faith. They stopped going to places of worship. And because they did not find, just as science satisfies their curiosity, gives concrete answers, even in the field of religion, religious adherents, followers demand some kind of scientific approach. That's how modern world, that's how the modern minds have trained themselves to be as a result of modern education. When Swami Vivekananda visited London several years ago, it's nearly more than 125 years ago, he said that somebody told him, if you apply these scientific principles, the people like Galileo and many others, they had to face religious persecution because the religious people felt, the fanatic religious people felt that their dogmas are threatened. So Swami Vivekananda said, if any dogma belonging to any religion is threatened by a scientific inquiry into them, those principles, then it is better they are destroyed because they are of no use anyway. If religion can stand the test of a scientific inquiry, then alone it should be accepted. Then only the core principles will remain. All the unessentials will be discarded or given less importance. Not that these rituals and all the different aspects of religion, they are necessary because in the beginning, just as we need to educate a child, we have to ask him to first go to the kindergarten before he comes up, he finishes his degree and becomes a postgraduate and maybe a doctorate. but he has to go through the initial training. He has to learn the alphabets. That doesn't mean that is the ultimate truth. As he grows up, as he learns more and more, his knowledge becomes more and more advanced. So nothing has to be discarded, but we have to understand the relative importance of the so-called religious principles, the religious dogmas, the religious rituals that we perform. And somehow each one of us, each religious sect has to find out certain core principles which motivated their founders, the founders of that particular religious sect or particular religion. They had certain experiences to back up whatever they said, to back whatever they said. So if we go to those core principles, we will find that there is hardly any quarrel. The same universe, just as a person who studies gravitation, whether he studies in French or English or any other university, the laws are the same. The language may change. The universal principles don't change. The law of gravitation is valid for a Frenchman as well as an Englishman as well as an African. The language may change. So also, if we approach religion in a scientific way, using the same methods of science, then you will find that there are certain core spiritual principles, universal principles, as universal as the principle of gravitation, principle of electricity, which have now been established in their respective fields. So also you'll find religion, if we compare, if we do a comparative study of different religious practices, religious disciplines, religious spiritual experiences of different traditions, however diverse these traditions may be, we will find certain core principles upon which all religions agree or have to agree. That is a very scientific approach to religion. So now, when you talk of religion, we come to the smallest unit, because religion is a matter which pertains to human beings. You can't expect a dog to be religious or spiritual, because it doesn't have a need for that. It's not evolved to understand the importance of spirituality. A dog or any other animal or any other plant species in the plant kingdom, they follow certain cosmic laws, and the evolution to which they have attained does not ask of them to inquire about the matters of spirit. It's only when it's only at the level of human being, when animals evolve into human beings, that he starts thinking about religion. So when we talk of a scientific spirit of religious inquiry, we start with the first question: why did man ever feel the need to inquire into a concept of God, into something which is non-physical? Why did he first start a spiritual quest? Now, the answer to this question also can be given in a very scientific and logical way. Why did he feel, in simple words, why did he feel that there should be some kind of religious effort or spiritual effort in life? One of the first things a human being, a thinking human being, as his thinking evolved, as he became, even though long before the scientific age, the primitive human being, as soon as the intelligence developed in him, as soon as he evolved, the first question that troubled him was the concept of afterlife or death. Because dogs don't bother, animals don't bother. They kill each other, and then they know death is inevitable. They fight for survival. As Darwin said, it is always a survival of the fittest. So he proposed a theory of evolution by saying that when certain species feel that they are threatened, they try to evolve. And who is the fittest among the species survives. It's a great theory. It may be valid in the animal kingdom, in the plant kingdom. We see it's only the fittest of animals. They survive. The poor other animals, they do not have that kind of survival rate. So in a way, biologically speaking, the survival of the fittest is a law which works in the animal kingdom. But when animals evolved into human beings, they started thinking. They had the gift of thinking, which was given by the Creator. Whatever be the nature of the Creator, human beings were faced this question. The entire humanity, even before it started the scientific quest, a systematic quest to understand the laws of nature. They discovered the fire long before the scientific principles were enunciated. It's not that science is a new thing. They saw, they observed, they generalized certain things, they learned how to manipulate nature for their own evolution, for their own betterment. That is how evolution happened. And the thinking process also evolved in human beings. But one of the primary reasons why he thought of God or afterlife, all these things came when he saw that every human being, this is one of the most scientific approaches to religion. You may be an atheist, but you can't deny that no matter how much we try, the fear of death always causes a lot of fear, causes a lot of worry in human beings. No human being, however noble or however enlightened or however scholarly he may be, can say for certain that I don't fear death. Maybe when he is young, he may say, I don't care for death. But as he grows old, when death approaches, no human being in his proper frame of mind will say that he loves death. So the fear of death, the mystery surrounding death, the mystery surrounding afterlife, the Egyptians and all the cultures, if you see, they have fantastic theories. The Egyptian mummies, if you see, they tell the history of how these pharaohs and these rich people thought that even after death, the spirit continues to live with the body. And that's why they gathered all their belongings. They ordered, in fact, to create huge pyramids so that their bodies can be mummified and preserved. They didn't want to die. Said, maybe we will die, but our bodies will live, our things will live with us. And they were preserved along some of the mummies, if you see, their animals, their pet animals, their wealth, everything was enclosed in these huge pyramids. Because they had a concept that no matter, even after death, the spirit continues to survive, or only thing it is not expressing itself, but they wanted all these people of different parts of the world, different cultures, they had their own solutions to the concept of life and death. So you may say, a person, whichever faith he belongs to, cannot deny that there is a fear of death. There is this intense desire for survival. In yoga, in Patanjali's yoga, it has a nice technical name. It is known as abhinivesha, the clinging to life. They don't say fear of death. It's clinging to life. Even if you try to crush a worm, it somehow tries to escape and it wants to cling to life. It says, you can't kill me. So that fear that I will exist no more, maybe in the physical body, but nobody wants to die. So that fear of death was the reason why first inquiries were made in the field of religion. Maybe religion began when human beings started to question, what after death? Does something survive death? Is there something known as the spirit? So when Jesus said in the Bible, the kingdom of God is the kingdom of the spirit, if you understand, try to understand what exactly he meant. What exactly was his attitude when he was crucified? He didn't care because he knew these people can destroy my physical body. I can be crucified. But the strength that he derived by belief in the eternal nature of the spirit, which is common to all religions. In fact, if you see whether it is Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Vedic religion, everywhere you will find a spiritual quest means, which implies that spirit is supreme in our life, not matter. This eternal quest of all the religious prophets, whether it is Buddha, whether it is Mahavir, whether it is Guru Nanak, Krishna, Jesus, they all believed in certain spiritual principles, certain spiritual truths, which according to them are more primary than matter. So, if you analyze all the teachings, if we approach religion with a scientific spirit, then you will allow all the people who want to know something about different religions or their particular religion which they believe in, you should allow them the freedom to ask questions. And that implies that most of these great truths, none of these prophets, including Buddha, including Christ, and all the other great prophets, ever said that just because I say these things to you, you have to accept. They had the freedom. The Upanishadic rishis who propounded principles of Vedanta, they said, use the brain that God has given you. Or try to feel, try to experience this truth yourselves. Don't just nod your head and say, because I said that, you have to believe. Because XYZ prophet said that. So Vedas or Vedanta were the first philosophy, you may say one of the first efforts to scientifically analyze the phenomena of life and its problems. So our life has a lot of problems. Science also developed because it faced problems. How did medicine develop? There were diseases and people try to find remedies for that. So every scientific quest began with problems. The problem of food, the problem of nutrition, the problem which we face in medicine, the problem which we face when we are dealing with materials, when we want to manufacture something. All these problems are solved by a scientific approach, and all put their minds together and find out a solution which enable them to solve that problem. So also spiritual life, if you approach it scientifically, you'll find that the major problem might have been the fear of death, but there are other problems. There are problems of ego, there are problems of health, there are problems of adjustment between people, personal relations, and so many problems which are not just physical. They deal with the mind. There are problems of anxieties, worries. There are problems even if we are not fully awake. Even in the dream state we have problems. We have nightmares. And we have problems of one human being in mental conflict with other human beings, not just physical killing. That's one problem, but there are certain problems at the mental level, at the thought level that need to be addressed. So that is how this science of yoga came. It's to solve the problems which were posed before Vedanta. Another philosophy was born, which is known as yoga, which deals with the science of, it can be called, it's very close to psychology, but it's not exactly psychology. It can be called a spiritual psychology. The inquiries that we have to make, whether the spirit exists or not, Or is a human being just a combination of a body and a mind? If there is a soul, what is this soul mean? You can't leave this question open-ended. You can't say we have a body, we have a mind, everybody accepts, and then we say we have a soul. If there is a soul, what is this soul? What your quest, the scientific quest will be incomplete if you leave it at that. That is what scientific approach to spirituality means. Don't believe, see what the prophets have to say about the spirit. Find out what Vedanta says about the spirit. Find out what yoga says about the different stages of our mind. Why does a person get angry? Why does a person feel jealous? Where do these different thoughts come from? Two brothers born with the same genetic pool, born of the same parents. One of them becomes evil. One of them becomes a noble person. How do you explain? Can we explain them biologically? Because the same genetic pool perhaps has come down, and biologically we can't explain why there are so many mental differences in the nature, in the mental capacity. Somebody is intelligent, another is a fool. Maybe they are born of the same parents. So yoga attempts to answer yoga, Vedanta, and all different systems of thought which are scientific. Just as when we deal with physical sciences like physics, chemistry, and all other material sciences, the science of spiritual quest, the spiritual quest also needs a scientific approach to get all the solutions. That is what spirituality means. When you emphasize the word spirituality as against religion, religion is used in a very general sense. It includes culture, it includes geography, it includes the area, where the religion was born. It includes so many things. It includes the racial tendencies. But spirituality is something which is the core thing of every religion. So the core of Christianity is no different from the core of Hinduism. It cannot be. It is just like saying, I am a scientist in Poland, this is my science, and you are a scientist in England, so this is your science. Science does not recognize borders. A scientific experiment is true universally. So the question is, are there certain core principles which you can verify and which can be applied to all religions, all sects? Then only true interfaith harmony, interfaith dialogue can take place. But if we quarrel over certain dogmas, as the religious leaders have been doing, then even there will be quarrel in religion as we have quarrels in science. But if you really follow the scientific approach, then when you find out a truth, any scientist who finds out a better way of explaining the same natural phenomena, his theory is accepted. Not that the previous discovery will be rejected, because at that time, depending on the experimental instruments that were available, he had made a certain discovery. But as we advance, they should be exposed to some kind of thorough scrutiny, and science accepts that. They may say we are traveling from a lower truth to a higher truth. These were truths once upon a time. They were experimentally verified under certain conditions. But when we change the conditions, when we go deeper, when we have more sophisticated instruments, we need to make corrections. So then nothing is absolutely wrong. So you can't criticize religions for some of the primitive beliefs they have, some of the rituals that they perform out of ignorance. But that doesn't mean that one has to stagnate at a particular place. We have to move forward. Just as a scientist is always keen to do further and further research in whatever field he's doing research. So otherwise, science would not have progressed. We swear by science because science allows that freedom to question and then find out a better method. And if somebody finds out a better method, that is accepted. The whole scientific community applauds him. Perhaps he gets a Nobel Prize because that was his discovery. But that doesn't mean that Newton was wrong or any other person who propounded certain theories based on his theoretical, his experimental verification. They were not wrong. They were true in their own field, in their own, when they propounded these, proved these theories. First, it might have been hypothesis. So we begin our religion, our religious quest by following certain texts like Bhagavad Gita, like the Upanishads, like the Bible, like the Quran. All these books, they are just introductory. But then our quest, if it stops there, it is not scientific. It's like just reading a book, but not doing any practical verification of what you read in the books. So also science says that unless and until you experience these religious truths or experiences which are mentioned in our scriptures for yourself, you are just following some dogma. It is nothing better than a dogma for you. There may be great truths in Gita, there may be great truths in the Upanishads, there may be greater truths in many other scriptures of the world. But what does it mean if it does not transform my life? And I don't have the same experiences which these scientists had. Till then, it remains a dead theory or some material or which is as useless as dogmas are to religious people. So when we enter the religious field, when we approach religion as a spiritual scientist, we have to use the same methods which science uses, the physical sciences, I mean, the scientific quest uses. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna, to read his gospel and his life, the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna as recorded by M, and also the Great Master, which is an excellent book where these spiritual truths are not only analyzed as if a scientist would do by Swami Sarvasthananda, because he had some medical background. So he knew the methods of science. Though he did not complete his studies or become a doctor, he was one of the disciples who took upon this task to scientifically analyze the spiritual experiences of Sri Ramakrishna, not leaving any place to doubt. Because I am a follower of Sri Ramakrishna, or because I have faith in him, I believe everything he said is true. That was not his approach. If you read the biography of Sri Ramakrishna, who had this, whom you can safely say is one of the greatest spiritual scientists of this century. Just as you have Nobel laureates in the field of science, he is far more competent because he did not take, first of all, he was not qualified. He did not have that academic knowledge. Might have heard some Upanishads and all, but he was not satisfied with anybody's expounding certain scriptures. There were so many people visiting Dakshineshwar, visiting Kamarpukur when he was a child. But he said, I can't believe unless I experiment myself. If there is a mother, there is a God whom I can communicate with, I have to see him or I have to see her. Whatever be the faith, whatever be the nature of God that I believe in, if I don't experience or see him, seeing means not just seeing with the eyes, experiencing the truth. It is just like reading about gravitation by reading a book, and then actually going out and just observe how the gravitational laws apply in the laboratory. That confirms the ideas that you have read in the book. So Sri Ramakrishna said, why should I waste time in reading of other people's experiences If Ram Prasad has experienced, if this saint has experienced, then why can't I experience? And if I can't experience those same truths, like a scientist would argue, he said, then they are of no use to me. They are useless dogmas. Just because X, Y, Z or some prophet or some saint has realized those truths. So he was, in his own way, a very, very scientific, a scientist in the field of spirituality. That is what attracted Swami Vivekananda. He had read enough books, he had read enough theology, he had been to all the different theoretical, you may say, scientists of religion who could expound these wonderful truths. And he went from door to door. He went to the Brahmo Samaj leaders, he went to people who are scholars in Hindu philosophy, in Buddhist philosophy, in Christian theology. He went because Calcutta was a place where all these religions, even Islam, his father was very fond of Persian, so he had access to these books. And a day came when he was fed up with all this theoretical knowledge. He said, I want a scientist, a spiritual scientist who can show me these truths. Otherwise, they are of no use. I've been hearing this since childhood. I'm not going to be benefited by that. If there is a God, I should see him. I should experience him. If there is some spiritual truth, if there is a soul, that's what he said in San Francisco letter. If there is a God, I should see him. If there is a soul, I should perceive it. Otherwise, it's better not to believe. And he said, I appreciate the atheist because at least he is not hypocritical. He doesn't believe just because any scripture says so. He will believe only if he experiences. He said that he is a more honest person. So he said, what is the difference between an atheist and a person who is full of dogmas and full of belief and quarrels with each other? They are equally bad, because the atheist at least is honest. He says, I don't believe in God because I have not experienced what this reality is, what the soul is. So he is willing to experiment, and if somebody is able to convince him and experimentally prove that this is the spiritual truth that you are seeking, then only you will accept. That is exactly what he got when he approached his master. He was the first person who said, it's not only that I see these spiritual truths or the spiritual experience, but I can give that spiritual experience to you. It's like a Nobel laureate assuring a young graduate when he's questioning that you come to my laboratory, then I'll demonstrate the truth of what I said. I just don't want you to believe me, and just don't want you to just theoretically try to understand these things. I will prove to you in the laboratory of spiritual life, but then you have to follow certain methodology. That's very important. It's not that these truths, just as you have to go to the laboratory and follow certain principles, follow certain methods, a methodology which enables you to conduct that experiment. Any methodology will not do. The scientist will insist that these are the conditions. This is the environment that we require for the experiment. And if that is done, then you will get the result, and then there is your proof. So also the science of yoga, I deliberately call it a science of yoga because that is the word that has been used. Yoga is a science. It is Yoga Shastra. When every verse, every chapter of Gita is introduced, they say that it is Upanishad. Upanishad means that which removes your ignorance and brings you close to knowledge. So the verses of the Gita, or the chapter of the Gita which is referred to, is not only an Upanishad, but it's also a Yoga Shastra. Means a technology. Shastra means a application of knowledge, principles of knowledge to real life situations, and when you apply it, certain truths are discovered. So it is not only an Upanishad, which is also based on experiences, but yoga is a method, the experimental verification of those same truths of Vedanta, the great truths, scientific truths that we desperately need as spiritual aspirants to transform ourselves for the sake of solving all the issues and problems that confront us. Because as I said, the spiritual quest is not just a quest which is done out of curiosity. You may learn history out of curiosity. You may learn physics out of curiosity. You may not need to apply it. But here it is an existential problem that we are trying to solve. Spirituality is not any other, like any other academic subject where you study and get a degree or maybe get some proficiency in that subject. That is the academic part of philosophy. But that philosophy which solves our existential problems, some of the main existential problems that have plagued humanity, human minds for centuries and centuries together. Everybody wants to know whether he is eternal, what happens after death, whether he continues to survive, what is the composition of this body. The biologist will say you are made of flesh, you are made of a genetic pool which you have inherited, you have grown, there are certain forces which, though not explainable fully, they still say they somehow help you to run the body, the different pranas, which are known as pranas in our in a scientific explanation that they give to the life vital forces. We call it the heartbeat and the different forces that make this body living. But when these forces suddenly stop for a reason which we do not know, nobody has been able to explain. They may be able to, doctors may be able to prolong death. But why does death occur? Why does it occur at a particular time? Why do things fail all of a sudden? There may be explanations how that person is, how a person has ultimately died. But the handling of these forces, the force of heartbeat, the forces of pumping of the lungs, which is one prana, the forces of blood circulation, everything comes to a stop when the person dies. What happens to that force? Is this not a scientific quest? So one needs to answer this question. These were the questions that were put before our philosophers, before the rishis of the Upanishads, who are spiritual scientists. People demanded an answer. When does a person die? What happens after a person dies? These are all existential problems. Why does a person feel sad? Why does he feel depressed? You can't explain everything so easily. It is as complex as any scientific experiment. Scientific experiments are also not very simple. Swamiji says that even to discover certain conduct certain chemical reactions, you need an environment, you need so many conditions to make that experiment successful. So when we study human personality, as a scientist would study certain materials, we also need that kind of environment. We need that kind of spiritual atmosphere. We need that kind of spiritual manual or guidance. We can't just randomly make experiments on our own body. We can't make experiments with our breath. It is a vital force, as some people try to do, pranayama and other things. They can lead to madness because you don't know how to handle a force. If you don't know how to handle a nuclear force, there'll be explosion. So just as a scientist is very, very careful, we have to have that same kind of caution, the same kind of care when we deal with our own personalities. We take a lot of care. Fortunately, biology has advanced so much. We know how to take care of our hair, how to take care of our body, how to take care of our skin. There's so much of research going on. But that is at the external. Yeah, just have 5 minutes. So the point I want to make is that at different levels of human personality, starting with the body. Of course, body is important. But there are still more and more subtle levels of our existence where this search has to continue. We can't stop. We can't simply say that the body, one fine day, one person has a heart attack and he died. But why did he die? What are the forces? Medicine can give some idea. But then what about the other faculties, other existential problems like fear, like psychological behavior, the different mental diseases? Why do they occur? What is the solution? So these problems also have to be addressed. And spirituality deals with the problems not only of the gross body at the gross level, but also progressively of the higher aspects of our personality. And we have to approach them just as a scientist would go into very deep into the nature of the disease and try to do more and more research, more and more specialized research to find solutions. So also you'll find that the spiritual quest also demands of a person to do more and more research into the science of the human mind, the science of the experiences that a human being has, the noble experiences, the suprasensory or supersensory experiences that a human being has. All these things have to be analyzed and studied in a very scientific way. And that is what a scientific approach to religion would really mean. So spirituality is a scientific approach to religion, and all the texts that we study have to be studied with the same spirit, whether it is Bhagavad Gita, even a simple book like Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. If you see, Swami Sarvasthananda, his great master, has analyzed as if a scientist would, he's asking counter questions. He's asking questions as if some atheist comes and disregards the spiritual experiences of Sri Ramakrishna. If you see how he has approached, as a scientist would approach every incident in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. And he liked that. Swami Vivekananda, he told Swami Vivekananda, you have to test the spiritual experiences, test the person whom you intend to follow, just as you test somebody, you just don't have to believe. Because there are many experiences of Sri Ramakrishna which Swami Vivekananda tested. You all know what are those incidents. So Sri Ramakrishna was very happy because he saw the scientific spirit in Vivekananda, his disciple, would not allow him to just dogmatically believe in whatever he said. He said, you first try to test it yourself and then accept it if it convinces you. So we will conclude now. This is the scientific approach which one should have, which will remove all the problems, all the ignorant and superstitions associated with any religious sect. Every religion has, or every religious sect has its own superstition. But a wise aspirant, a scientifically inclined aspirant, will try to remove those things and try to find out the core principles. That is what we are trying to attempt. That is what we are attempting through our different classes. And we'll take this forward. This is just an approach. But then when you come to each field of religion, that is Vedanta, yoga, these are all names. But all are different ways of approach to the fundamental problems of human personality, the existential problems, which these prophets, these great saints have said they have found solutions. And we don't have to believe them, but at least we have to try to practice what they say and then experimentally verify them so that we can transform our own lives. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.